Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Sundman lecture series. This is the third lecture of the day, and we are privileged to have Steve Roach speak for us, to us, at us, whatever. And this title is News About Coins, Looking at the Hobby Since 1960 Through Coin World's Pages. Steve Roach is based in Baltimore and has served Coin World in a variety of roles since 2006. He's been a very successful author, writing some great stories, talking about our hobby, and doing it very lucidly. He is a life member of the ANA and a certified member of the International Society of Appraisers. Steve received his BA in Art History and Organizational Studies from the University of Michigan and a JD from the Ohio State University Moritz College of Law. So he's got a great background, and as a numismatist, he is extremely knowledgeable and has proven himself by writing some great stories about him. Thank you, Steve.
Doug, thank you. So if anyone here was expecting to see the education Steve Roach, who works at the ANA, there's two Steve Roaches now. It's very confusing to everyone. So I am the senior Steve Roach, and thanks everyone for coming. Come on in. Hey guys. Good to see you. So we are going to talk about Coin World. We have some people from Coin World here in the back, and Coin World is, how many people are subscribers of Coin World? That's what we like to see. So Coin World's been around since 1960 when Doug and Sundman series announced what the topic was. I thought, hey, this is a great chance for us to look back at Coin World, and gives me a nice excuse to plumb our archives for some topics. My first interaction with Coin World was in 1989. I was at a Michigan State Numismatic Society convention in Dearborn, Michigan, and I was at one of Florence Shook. Anyone remember Florence? Yeah. I was at one of her Young Numismatist programs, and they gave out free Coin World almanacs. And they were signed by Margot Russell. Now I realize they were probably just like back inventoried books that they were just grateful to get rid of. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So for some reason, I ended up getting a Coin World subscription as a 9-year-old because I was really cool. And so I had that subscription, and that's how I was introduced to coins. Then in 1991, they had the ANA Chicago Centennial Convention. Now that we're back in Chicago, was anyone at that convention? Wow. Okay, so we're going back in time. And I was, I think, 11 at the time, and I thought, oh, an ANA convention would be very exciting. And then ANA comes to Detroit in 1994. And Larry and Linda were there. Anyone else remember ANA 94 in Detroit? Yes. Fantastic show, 20 minutes away from home. And then I decided that, you know what, I'm going to stick around in coins. I love it. So I ended up making coins a large part of my career. Joined Coin World in 2006 as a columnist, 2009 as an associate editor, was editor-in-chief for 3 years, and now they keep me on as an editor-at-large where I get to do fun presentations like this, and I get to share my love of the hobby and the industry with people. One of the neatest things is that I get to write most of our content on the US coin market, so I have around 200 coins a year that I get to share with readers to tell the story of the US coin market. So that's what's fun about Coin World and my relationship with it. So Joel Oritz, who's one of our wonderful columnists, wrote in his Numismatic Bookie column in a March 2020 weekly issue of Coin World, the world of coins didn't have a coin world prior to 1960 because the coin collecting ranks had been relatively thin. And so he put Coin World in the context of returning servicemen. They came home from World War II, they had free time, disposable income, they were looking for something to do, they were looking for a hobby, and they decided, hey, coin collecting seems like it's gonna be a leisurely, pleasant activity. Also, there were a lot of neat coins you could find in circulation at the time. It's a lot like the pandemic, where you had people with a little more disposable income than normal because they weren't going out. A lot of people did, some people didn't. There was a nice environment for hobbies because people had the chance to be at home. In the 1960s, things like coins, stamps blew up. More recently, we've seen an explosion in sports cards, sports memorabilia. things that probably none of us could even define as collectibles are now very popular because of COVID. Same thing when we're thinking about World War II. So in the 1950s and 60s, we're thinking of the US Mint. It's selling proof sets, mint sets, increasing numbers each year, in very stark contrast to now where US Mint sales are largely declining. Back in the 50s and 60s, every year would see sales more than the prior year. There was Numismatic Scrapbook, there was the American Numismatic Association's monthly publication, The Numismatist, which hopefully we all get as members and enjoy. And in January 1960, Numismatic News starts on a bi-weekly publication schedule. J. Oliver Amos had a lot of family success in printing Lynn's Stamp News. At the time, it was a weekly. It went out to 69,000 subscribers. And the family firm, the Sydney Printing and Publishing Company, also published the Shelby County Democrat, which would become the Sydney Daily News. Now, the Sydney Daily News, Sydney is a small city of around 20,000 that is 40 miles north of Dayton, still has a Sydney newspaper, but it is not as vibrant as it used to be. Thankfully, coin publications are still up, running, and vibrant. But at the time when J. Oliver Amos was coming up with an idea and thought, hey, what if we did what we did with stamps with coins, people were not really that enthusiastic. He had a lot of haters. They said that the market was too small. They said that, coin prices don't change all that much. Coin prices are pretty static. We didn't have gold and silver going up and down like we do today. Everything was pretty stable and wasn't going to be enough news. How are you going to fill a publication and create demand for a compelling publication that has both subscribers and also has advertisers? Because why are people going to advertise? Because they're going to get new clients for their business. So you need both of those elements in a publication back in the 1960s and today. So I go back to 2009, and with our editor at the time, Beth Deischer, who's at the show now, she's working with the Anti-Counterfeiting Task Force. She put together a series of decades issues of the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And tomorrow, at the same time, probably the same room, I'll be giving a talk on trends in the hobby as we're looking at the last decade going forward. This one will focus on the 60s through the 2000s. So give you a little back in time. Here we have our first issue of Coin World, dated April 21st, 1960. So to the bane of all of the writers at Coin World who have to deal with deadlines that aren't necessarily of the publication date, this is done so that people don't get old news, especially when the only way to get Coin World was through the mail. They would have 2 weeks issue date in the future so that it wouldn't be seen as stale. And there's Coin World's first home in Sydney, Ohio. It had 175,000 paid subscribers in 1965, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So J. Oliver Amos shared his thoughts on Coin World in a 25th anniversary supplement that was part of a 1985 issue. He said, "We had to prove our product to a lot of disbelievers, especially in the dealer community." And he thought the key to making a successful, viable publication was going to be weekly trends. He said, we found by observation that most people wanted to talk about their coins. They also loved to talk about how much they paid for their coins. They also loved to tell people when they got a good deal. And they also loved to gloat when they made money when they sold their coins. And all of these involve values. So he said, let's look at the Wall Street Journal. Let's look at a trends column that encouraged people to think about their coins as an asset where their value changed maybe more than they thought it did. We were in a framework in the 1960s where you had the Red Book and the Blue Book. They came out once a year. With Coin World, you could have publications with a value every single week, and those values could change. And you could look and see that your 1960 cent went up 25 cents or down 10 cents and get pretty jazzed. So Dayton dealer James Kelly was our first trends editor, and our first editor of the publication was D. Wayne Johnson. He's known as Dick Johnson to the hobby. He moved with his wife to Kansas to be the first editor. there he is with the pilot issue, Volume 1, Issue 0. And that's a slim issue, 24 pages, cover date of April 21st, 1960, and it served as the sample edition. And this was where we start the tradition of dating things 2 weeks in the future so that people don't think they are getting stale news. Now, the Amos family looked at Coin World and looked at the viability of a weekly coin publication in the same way that they built community newspapers. And they said it takes 41 different factors to make a daily newspaper a vital community force. So these are things that we try to instill today: integrity, responsibility, accuracy, complete and unbiased news, leadership, and character. And something that we sometimes forget in an era where it's so easy to share our opinions on social media, through email, is that letters to the editor still are, but they used to be the way that people would be able to share their opinions on the hobby. It's still an important part of the publication, but if you look at the letters to the editor in the 1960s and 1970s, they are just exceptionally rich, and there's a lot of them. Another tenet that Amos had was that he wanted to have the publication give some type of cachet or validity to dealers, and say that if you were advertising, it was a model of something like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, with this idea of the collector as king, and that you would be able to trust the advertisers in Coin World. Amos said, "We established a policy that 1 mistake is acceptable, 2 mistakes and you're under siege, 3 mistakes and you are out." Another innovation that Dick Johnson had within coin publications was a robust classified ads. I know that for a lot of people who grew up collecting in the 90s, one of the main ways that people got into subscribing to Numismatic News, for example, was that they had free classified ads, a free 25-word classified ad. And I placed one when I was little. They were fabulous because they were so tightly organized. There was a section for Flying Eagle cents, a section for Lincoln cents. And so Amos tried to create a model that would allow people to very specifically advertise within categories. The first projected title was Johnson's Weekly Coin News, after Dick Johnson. That didn't test well. It ended up being Coin World, easy to remember, easy to spell, not subject to any misconceptions or confusion. And the way that they started to find news was subscribing to every single local publication that they could within the coin industry. So they would find coin clubs, they would find state organizations, regional organizations, get every piece of news coming in, and then share that. Publication launches in April 1960 and quickly becomes a success, had 55,000, specifically 53,164, since we are on the record here, since we're being videoed, with a cover story that touted National Coin Week, which is still something that exists today that the ANA promotes. Within a year, went from 24 pages to 56 pages, and then a little bit of swagger that Coin World had in the 60s was that it had a subscriber count in the right corner of page 1 that recorded the growing numbers each week for everyone to see. So it's really nice that they're showing everything that's happening in local coin clubs. But thankfully, we had something that at the time was a huge deal that today everyone kind of forgets about: 1960 small and large date cents. This was everything in 1960. Here's an ad here that is offering a 1960 Pontiac or $3,750 in hard cold cash or a certified check for one $50 bag of small date cents. You can see here the difference. Today, neither of these are particularly special coins, but at the time, they were as exciting as you could get. So I wrote here because I am not so much an errors and varieties guy. We leave that to our Collectors Clearinghouse friend, Mike Diamond, and I'll describe here exactly what I wrote. The U.S. Mint initially said that all of the 1960 dated small cents were from dies created by the same master hub, a statement that was kind of true. The master hub had no date. However, a second master die was hubbed from the master hub and had a different style date engraved in the new master die because it was less likely to get chips. And back in the 1950s, collecting coins with die chips was a thing. It is not anymore. Maybe it is. If it is, good for you. The first editorial mention of the small date and large date varieties occurs in the June 23rd, 1960 issue, and then this just creates this little market frenzy. Tons of dealers buy ads, collectors are looking for them, and the trends editor at the time called it the summer fiasco, explaining the intense speculation which sent the prices completely out of reason and the equally fast decline when the market would not absorb the quantity available at anywhere near the top price, will have an unfavorable reaction on their future recovery. And we can think of a lot of little tiny booms and busts within our market that have occurred in the past 50 years since. Now, Johnson leaves the publication in the 1960s, and Margot Russell, who had begun as a freelance coin feature writer at Coin World, recalls, immediately I recognized the potential for the publication was mint state 65. She knew her audience even then. She would serve in several roles before being named editor in 1967. Now, also in the 1960s, we have, just an example. Coin World generated so much mail on a daily basis in the 1960s that it clogged the Sydney post office. Here are bags of incoming mail, all directed at Coin World. Just to give you a sense of how hot the letter to editor section was in Coin World's collecting clearinghouse. Like, people were just hungry for a way to share their hobby, and they did it by mailing Coin World. Another fun blast from the past, there were 2 shifts of 11 linotype operators that were needed to type the weekly and daily publications in Sydney in the 1960s. And here we have John Amos, who was my first big boss at Coin World, and his father, Oliver Amos, in the middle, with the second full-time editor-in-chief of Coin World, Margot Russell. So in the 1960s, we have incredibly shifting coin precious metal pricing. You have silver rises to $1.28 an ounce by 1963. Silver coins are worth more than face value. You could take a Series 19 a silver certificate, redeem it for a Morgan dollar, and that Morgan dollar could be sold for a profit. You can see how that becomes a problem. And hoarding results, because, if you can take coins out of circulation, sell them to a dealer, and make more money than what they're worth in face value, any reasonable person is going to try to make some money out of it. So 1964 sees the production of the Kennedy half dollar, which creates even more interest in coin collecting. Here we have Gilroy Roberts, the chief engraver of the U.S. Mint, shown with his plaster sculpture of the obverse of the Kennedy half dollar. You have all of these factors that are making people incredibly into coins. And then Ava Adams, here she is in the center with fellows at the Mint. She is kind of blaming coin collectors for the shortage that is the result of a lot of things: shifting precious metal prices, a huge increase in coin collecting. So a lot of things happen in 1965. The silver is taken out of most coins. We get that sandwich clad composition that we use today. We have special mint sets that replace proof sets. We have all of these things that are taking coins away from collectors, because coin collectors are blamed for a circulating coin shortage. A columnist, Mort Reed, said in Coin World's pages, coin collecting is one of the few remaining institutions that can join all men, people, regardless of faith, nationality, or political convictions, in one cause without the shame of bigotry or the scars of prejudice. And I think, especially set within the civil rights movement of that era, it's a very nice view of coin collecting, because it is a unifying thing. And he also is able to report all of these trends within Weekly's price trends. And that's making Coin World even more viable as a weekly publication, because you have things like the 1964 proof set that's initially sold for $2 that then skyrockets to $20 per set. Now we'll end the 1960s with the 1964D peace dollar. 300,000 were struck, none have ever survived, no images were ever produced. And now Roger Burdett, who is a frequent contributor to Coin World, wonderful researcher, he's identified that the peace dollars and master dies were destroyed in 1937. They looked familiar to what we understand the peace dollar to look. There's a lot of rumors that maybe they left the mint, but like the 1933 $20 double eagle, any that pop up are going to remain property of the US government. But you will have a fun conversation story for life. And if you find one, call Jeff Stark back there. He will write you the most wonderful article in Coin World and make you famous or infamous. You will be famous for a minute and then you'll give up your coin probably. But I think every person here would love to see a 1964 peace dollar. Another thing that Whitman did a few years ago is when they were looking through the Mint's heritage assets, they found either a hub or a die for a 1964 dated Morgan dollar. So who knows if they're out there too. Now we'll move a little bit forward to the 1970s. 70s saw Coin World enter its teenage years. The circulation continues to go up, and there's lots of little things happening within a hobby that is quickly maturing. You have the 1971 Eisenhower dollar that is popping up. You then have in the 70s its replacement with the much less popular Susan B. Anthony dollar. We've got our 1976 dated bicentennial quarter, half, and dollar coins, and it gives people a lot of reasons to look at their pocket change. There is a movement, unsuccessful, for a national contest to design the reverses for the denomination, and it gets people thinking about coins maybe more than they had for at least a decade since they were able to make money by taking silver coins out of circulation in 1964, 1965. There's another Lincoln cent that was less desirable in change that popped up. Couldn't find it. In 1972, we have our double die Lincoln cent. Fantastic, because what we like when we have a double die is something that people can see without magnification, and that's something that everyone can understand. 1955 double die, crazy. Like the letters are fully, or the numbers and some of the letters are fully separated. 1972, pretty close. And Coin World figured this out because it was at the Ben Franklin Coin Club at a meeting where people started talking about them. And it created a lot of collector confusion. But Coin World's editor at the time, Margot, said, when this news hits, I picture everyone looking through bags to track down one or two. The search always seems to spark new life along the way, and new collectors are born in the process. And that's why we love when discoveries happen, especially things that you can find in pocket change, because like we heard in one of our talks this morning, when you are not confronted with coins every day, you kind of forget that they exist. Something that we're seeing a little bit with stamps is people aren't using stamps every day. You're not really getting the sense that stamps are that vital in our lives. So any excuse to look at change is a good thing. Now, another story that happened in 1974 were the aluminum cents. Coin World had one pop up in 1994, sent to the offices by a former employee of a Philadelphia steel mill who said that a few had dropped on the floor from accident, oopsies, when they were going into a smelting pot. They escaped destruction, ended up in his pocket. Coin World would later reveal that some 1975 dated aluminum cents were also struck. Both of them remain illegal to own, but here we were able to show one, the Tovin specimen that was authenticated in 2005. So our managing editor, who is now an editor at large with me, Bill Gibbs, has done a lot of the stories on this. We'll talk a little bit about Bill. He was at Coin World starting in the 1970s and was here when a lot of these coins were discovered. And that's one of the cool things about Coin World, is that when someone starts there, they stay there for a long time. So you have this wonderful longitudinal history and this institutional knowledge that we all get to share with each other. Another thing that we have in the 1970s is the Hobby Protection Act, which requires that replica items bear the word copy. And I make a stamping gesture because I know that one of the groups at the show is stamping copy on counterfeit items so that you can legally own counterfeits without worry about them not being legal, because they will be stamped copy by the Hobby Protection Act. So Hobby Protection Act starts in 1973, requires copy on replica coins, and this is the result of a lot of behind-the-scenes work through organizations like the ANA. Now, of course, the problem of counterfeit coins has not been resolved, as we'll talk about, with the final topic of the day, deceptive Chinese counterfeits. Something that happened in the 1970s is that we have this articulation of grading standards with the Annex, American Numismatic Association Certification Service, that starts up in 1972. It is initially organized by Charles Hoskins, Philadelphia Mint employee. He developed the numismatic services there, and then when the service opens for business on June 15, 1972, it is not in Colorado Springs, but rather in Washington, D.C., in a bank that was with space that was rented to them by Ava Adams, who we saw earlier when she was handling the shovel with the four men surrounding her. She happened to be on the bank's board and was on the ANA's board, so that was nice and convenient. But ANA is based in Colorado Springs. Didn't quite make sense for them to be in DC, so Annex moved to Colorado Springs in 1975. Now, the ANA is important in this because they took the lead in developing a hobby-wide grading standard, and they embraced a numerical grading standard. One of their big innovations was popularizing this concept of Mint State 70, Mint State 65, Mint State 60. We have about uncirculated grades with these line drawings. Often when I'm talking to new collectors, I say the line drawings are better to use than pictures for learning coin grading. And I'm getting a couple nods because you're able to not focus on some of the individual specifics of coins, but rather how coins acquire wear. So the first publication of the ANA grading guide is published by Whitman in December 1977. And while there's the 1 to 70 Sheldon scale, it doesn't make a lot of use of the intermediate grades. That will happen later. 1970s is also a huge year for precious metals. Well, 1970s was a big decade, 1974, 1975 especially. In 1974, President Gerald Ford signed an executive order which allowed Americans to own all forms of gold, including gold coins. It represented a reversal of the ban of ownership on many coins that President Franklin Roosevelt initiated in 1933, and it set the stage for the American Eagle Gold and Silver Coin Program in 1986. We can't go through the 70s without talking also about some of the hordes of silver dollars that came out. There were 400,000 silver dollars in the Redfield hoard. GSA offered millions of Carson City Morgan dollars in mint state grades that had just been sitting undisturbed in bags brought to the hobby. I'd enjoy this one right here, a scene that will even today quicken the pulse of most coin collectors. A bag of Morgan dollars poured from the original canvas bag, which they were sealed by the Carson City Mint decades earlier. So it really got to be a treasure hunt. I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with these black precursors to the slab. These were how these were largely marketed by GSA. And we have one of our charming ads from GSA in the 1970s. It says, "The coins Jesse James never got," with a fun little old style gun on there. So lots of broad marketing of coins to people who might not have been collectors. There was also some really cool things that they had to sell with all these Morgan dollars coming on the market. Now, collectors got some new coins in the 1980s as well with the revitalization of the commemorative coin program. It had went on hiatus in 1954 with the Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington commemorative programs, and the 1982 George Washington half celebrates the 250th anniversary of our first president's birth. We have 90% silver half dollars in the tradition of the 1892 to 1954 series. They were sold in proof and uncirculated formats. Here we have Mint Director Donna Pope examining a newly struck example of the San Francisco issue, which was the proof. And these are incredibly popular. Thankfully, with the commemorative coin program, it gives Coin World a lot to write about because we have things that are proposed and never quite make it into law. Some are successful, some aren't. But in the 1980s, commemorative coins were incredibly successful. We had our 1983 and 1984 Olympic coin program, which was supposed to be even more significant than it ended up being in terms of number and types of coins struck. The 1986 Statue of Liberty Centennial was a huge winner. 1987 Constitution Program, 1988 Olympic Games, 1989 Congress Bicentennial Programs. All of them are successful, but then mintages start declining. And they decline for a lot of reasons. There ends up being a proliferation of programs. There ends up being maybe less popular programs, less popular designs, a lot of reasons that we'll go into when we get into the 90s. Now, under Beth Deischer, who we have pictured here, you can say hi to her at the show, and coinage redesign activist Diane Wolf, there is a huge initiative again for changing coin designs. Here they are submitting petitions with 12,000 signatures from collectors seeking redesign of US coins. And that gives you a sense of kind of the influence that Coin World had in the 1980s, in that they could initiate an effort for signatures and get 12,000 of them, and then deliver them to our treasurer in Washington, D.C. 1980s saw a lot of attention to coins, some of it good, some of it not so good. We have consumer protections, and the Federal Trade Commission is taking a look at our industry. They're looking at telemarketing firms that are selling overpriced coins to coin collectors. Remember, this is before slabbing. So they're promoting their investment potential, and the Federal Trade Commission says, hey, if you are promoting coins as an investment vehicle, we might need some more regulation here. The ANA worked with the Federal Trade Commission on a consumer alert brochure about the risks of investing in coins, but dealers worried that increased publicity about coin investment and kind of understanding too much of how the sausage is made, so to speak, would make consumers turn away from the hobby. Those looking at circulating coins got a thrill in 1982 when the composition of the cent changes. U.S. Mint stops and circulated mint cents in 1982 and 1983. But to go back, something that is kind of understated in the 1980s that ends up becoming a big deal is that the American Arts Gold Medallion Program. It issues half-ounce, 1-ounce gold medals honoring American artists, and it is the preliminary test run for the American Eagle program. Now, we think about the U.S. Mint's pricing schedule as being kind of hard to understand and unpredictable today. Back in the early 80s, if you wanted one of these and you wanted to buy them from the Mint, you had to call a telephone number, get the day's prices for the metals, take the order form to the post office to validate the date the order was placed, then wait for the orders to be processed, which could be several months. Then they would be delivered. It was not easy to buy these. Thankfully, it's easier now. There were a few efforts to get the American Eagle series underway, false starts, before it finally gets going in 1986. Biggest thing that happens in the 1980s is the advent of third-party coin grading. We have Professional Coin Grading Service, PCGS, in 1986, NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corp. In 1987, and they built upon Alan Hager's innovation of a plastic holder that holds a coin. Now, we saw earlier with the Annex initial certification that it's just that. It is a piece of glossy paper with pictures and identification of the coin. It looks at the obverse and reverse separately, and it doesn't really consider market grading. Something that PCGS and quickly soon after NGC does is that they introduce market grading, which considers the technical aspects of a coin's grade and then considers how it would be perceived in the marketplace. Another innovation that, again, today we take for granted, but the grading services made use of the full 11 points in the Mint State and Proof scale. So 60, 61, 62, 63. Before it was 60, 65, 70. ANA reluctantly throws in 63 and 67, but it wasn't until third-party grading services got in the mix that we're making use of all of these intermediate grades that fuel the coin industry today. ANA was the leader with Annex and starts to drag its feet in the late 80s, and it loses ground because the ANA board is debating on whether it should use these intermediate grades like Mint State 64, and then Annex, which had been a significant revenue driver to the ANA, saw declining market share. And this is kind of wild because there's a lot of discussion in letters and commentary at the time from the PNG, the Professional Numismatist Guild, who warned against the use of numerical grading, instead suggesting that adjectival grading, like choice or gem, was better suited to the coin industry. 1990s saw an expansion of the commemorative point. Last one of this series. Here we have our initial designs for the gold bullion coin, and we have the sculptor of the reverse of the gold bullion coins. 1995, July 12th. It's a congressional hearing that is kind of underrated when it comes to numismatic history, because at this congressional hearing, it inspired legislation to limit commemorative programs, and it sets the groundwork for the 50 States program. The series starts in 1999, and it's America's most ambitious circulating commemorative coin program. We saw the 1976 dual-dated commemorative or circulating commemoratives quarters, half dollars and dollars. That was nothing compared to the 50-state quarter program. Got people energized, got people excited, got people looking at coins. And it was inspired by Canada, who saw success with 12 different circulating coins that commemorated the country's 125th anniversary in 1992. So this one hearing limits the commemorative coin program. Then it also plants the seed for our 50 States quarter program. Here we have Coin World's editor at the time, Beth Deischer, who is testifying, along with the Mint director, ANA's president, coin dealer Harvey Stack, and an ANS curator, Alan Stahl. I have a lot here on the 50 States program. You can read about it in Coin World. There's a lot published on it. 50 States coin program was incredibly invigorating to the hobby in that they were easy to understand. The designs were supposed to relate to the history of the state. The designs involved participation with people from the state. Many states had open competitions where people could submit designs. There were state commissions where people were selected to help pick the coin designs. So it had a lot of different grassroots involvement so that people felt some ownership within these reverse designs. And I have another funny detour of the 90s. I was going to make a slide on it, but then I thought it might be a little bit shady, but I'll talk about it. Does anyone remember money cards? Okay, so Coin World used to have a publication called Money Card Collector. It lasted for several years. Money cards were supposed to be the huge collectible in the 90s. Do you remember money cards? Reluctantly?
Yes.
Yeah. They were supposed to be everything. They were prepaid phone cards where you could buy minutes from MCI or Sprint. Then you would have $5 worth of minutes on a phone card that you could use. The idea was that nobody would ever cash them in because if you scratch the number on the back, the phone card would not be worth anything. They were supposed to be the next huge collectible. The fact that no one in this room, even Doug, whose job it is to know about these things, has no real fond connection with them shows how that was a miss. But it also shows kind of good for Coin World. They had a publication, and when I was at that summer seminar, I went to the downstairs library where the specialty publications are found, and I found all the money card collectors, spent a good hour looking at them, and thought, who would have ever have thought this was going to be a big thing? But it was. I go on a detour. So Congress, we're going to go back to the slides before I get too excited about money cards. Coin World's editor warns at this July 12th hearing, unless Congress quickly and decisively controls the number of commemorative coins being struck, there's a strong evidence that the collector base for U.S. commemorative coins will evaporate. And she was right. The commemorative coin program was never the same since the 1980s. 1990s saw it decline, 2000s, and now today, it's just not where it used to be. Also in the 90s, we had our 1995 double die obverse cent. It is the first double die that I remember finding in circulation, or at least looking for. I remember at summer seminar back in 1995 at the Wyan auction, someone donated a bag of 1995 cents, and as a way to keep all the kids busy, they just put us all at a table and just had us find them. No one found anything, but it kept us all quiet and busy for 2 nights, which was, I'm sure, a blessing to everyone at the ANA. We've got some big things that are happening within this idea of computer grading. Computer grading was supposed to be the thing that was going to change the market. It didn't. Much like money cards, it just sort of fizzled out. So with computer grading, PCGS had a program called Expert, and it started with Morgan dollars, looking at mark, strike, luster, eye appeal, toning, color, reflectivity, and a computer would make 2.2 billion calculations per coin. It starts with Morgan dollars, it's supposed to extend to other series, but it just wasn't economically sustainable. Grading services branched out to other series, but computer grading never really got off the ground. There was another company called CompuGrade that had a brochure, but nothing really replaced the human aspect of coin grading. I've bypassed a little bit of the markets. Basically, expensive coins became expensive, super coins became super expensive. One of the big rarities that made news a lot within CoinWorld's pages is the 1913 nickel. And 5 of them were struck in kind of clandestine circumstances. It showed up in the 2003 ANA World's Fair of Money, where it went on public display after it spent decades in a brown padded envelope in a closet. Beth Deischer from CoinWorld had a big part in this story. It was something that is kind of cool because it was a coin that was examined by a major coin dealer who said that it was fake. So the family puts it in this envelope in its closet and just sort of forgets about it. Here are the Walton heirs after they showed the coin at a coin show. It was eventually sold, but it's this wonderful story of a discovery that is at the heart of coin world and at the heart of coin collecting, in that someone could find a 1913 nickel, a $2-3 million coin, just sitting in their closet. I mean, it hasn't happened to me. I hope that it happens to one of you. Happened to the Waltons. 1996, we also see eBay. eBay changes the market fundamentally in ways because it can bypass the dealer. Anyone can sell their coins. I remember myself as a high school kid in Michigan selling coins on eBay and being able to have the same platform as a major dealer. And eBay brings a ton of people into the hobby. Never quite fully ingratiates itself within the hobby. There was, I think, at one point like an eBay ANA collaboration, but they've always been a little bit separate from the hobby. But they've helped people build collections and have helped people sell collections. Just a couple things that I will end with. A lot on the coin market. 1933 double eagles. They were discovered in, there's only one of them that's allowed. It is the current record of any most expensive coin sold at auction. Recently, a couple years ago, sold for $17 million and change. Only one of them is allowed to be owned by the government. They pop up now and then. The Langford family found 10 of them. Long court trial. I think I probably wrote 100,000 words on it in Coin World. If you read even 10% of it, bless you and thank you. Because it was a technical trial about the government's right to confiscate coins that it may or may not have issued. They were resolved in favor of the government, and those coins popped up at a couple ANA shows, and they are not legal to own, but that one that sold for 18 million. Something that is kind of fun is that we have a lot of stuff happening with Lincoln cents during the time. We started off with Lincoln cents, so it's kind of elegant towards the end to focus on them. One of the fun stories that I found was the 2010 Lincoln cent reverse that was initially proposed and was ultimately approved by one of the government commissions, in that it had a reverse design that had a bundle of wheat, and it was deemed inappropriate after discovering a resemblance to a German coin from the 1920s. And, readers they had opinions on this one. Another thing that readers had a lot of opinions on is a 1963 cent, graded Proof 70 Deep Cameo by PCGS. It sells for $40,000 at auction in 2004. It's really the first crazy registry set price that we see within the market. And when I say registry set price, I mean an otherwise generally common coin that is in an exceptional grade that sells for a ton of money. So here's one, sells for $40,000 and change, and it's ultimately bought back by PCGS after it develops a spot. So I love this because it's kind of a cautionary tale too. We were able to share both when it sold for a lot and when PCGS bought it back, because PCGS issued a article on its 10 biggest mistakes. So a lot of things that get readers riled up, which is great for Coin World. We've talked a lot about the issue of counterfeits in the hobby and the Counterfeit Hobby Protection Act in 1973. Something that Coin World did that was absolutely just fabulous in the around 2010 in the surrounding years is that a journalist went to China and became friends with one of the fakes producers. And something that Coin World did was that we published a lot of features in 2008 and 2009 that showed the extent of counterfeiting in Asia. We looked at the big tree coin factories, minting operations, the shop, the proprietor's process of producing dies, sourcing planchets, selling the coins on eBay. They had property that was sold from the US government so that they could strike coins in the exact same presses. They would melt down coins so that they would have the exact specific gravity of the coin. They would have different levels of quality. So you would have kind of your base level eBay stuff, and then you would have incredibly good and deceptive counterfeits. One of those coins that was not deceptive, but which is meant to be fun, is our 1964 D Peace dollar. Of course, this one is nicely marked copy in compliance with the Hobby Protection Act, but this is an idea of what it would look like. You can still find these on eBay. I know that Moonlight Mint makes nice new versions of them, but here's one that's meant to look old. So fakes don't always have to be scary. They can also sometimes be kind of fun. And we are just about done. If you want to talk more about the coin market, I'll stick around for as long as people want. But one of the wonderful things about Coin World and putting this together is that you have a longevity of people who have been there. Bill Gibbs had been at the publication for 47 years. He was a subscriber in 1970, joining Coin World after he graduated from Bowling State Green University. He starts as an assistant in the Collectors Clearinghouse department. To put the scope of how many letters Coin World would get in perspective, Collectors Clearinghouse, a one-page feature that does error coins, at one point had 2 full-time staff members, which is insane, because the publication now is much leaner. Paul Jilks, he's not at this show, but he's been reporting since the 80s. Our readers have enjoyed Jeff Stark, who was here for a minute for 20 years. Fern Loomis, our proofreader, has been there for, not to put an age on her, but since the 90s. And just, it is a wonderful continuity of leadership that everyone has tried to give the hobby while still teaching everyone about new things to collect and hopefully reminding people and teaching them something about what they already have. And I think that the initial idea of Coin World, that it would replicate a lot of the purpose of a community newspaper, has held true, which is why it is still a viable publication today. So with that, we are at my time. I'll stick around for as long as people have questions, but I want to thank you all for being part of this presentation. I know it's a little bit loose, but if we're going through 50, 60 years of history in 50 minutes, we leave some things out. So thanks, everyone.
And if you're able to answer some questions, is there anybody that has any questions at this point?
Or comments. Larry!
Just a comment. You were talking about the early 60s, kind of a boom in coin collecting because of the World War II ending. And I had an uncle who was in the Army Air Corps during World War II, who was stationed in the Philippine Islands. And I think when I was 10 years old, out of nowhere, he gave me a counterstand banknote with the Japanese government and like 10 centavos and 5 centavos. So I think the soldiers from Europe and Asia bringing home coins and giving them to their nephews and kids.
Yeah.
Probably that's kind of how I got started with coin collecting.
Yeah, right on. I also meant to give Bob a shout out because I missed his talk this morning, but he went through a lot of the stuff on grading services that I just sort of glossed over. So I think that some of this will be available online maybe afterwards. So maybe if it is, check out Bob's presentation too. Yeah.
How is the publication for Coin World changed now from as far as people getting the actual mail publication as to digital? Has it really moved over a bunch? Is people still getting the actual physical copies in the mail, or has it changed dramatically?
Thankfully, our readership is mature. And having a mature readership means that a lot of people still love their print publications. And once we kind of figured out the polybagging so that the Postal Service wouldn't destroy the weekly publication, that became a little bit nicer. But a lot of people now consume it digitally. But now that people don't rely on newspapers as much to get their news, they're looking at it as almost like a leisure activity. The print publication has been pretty stable because people like having the magazine format, and dealers like advertising in a publication format where people keep it as a reference, especially with the monthly publication. Like, if you only, like, I've seen them at doctor's offices, I have seen them in random places where I would never have expected it. And so the lifespan of a printed publication can be a few years. And the values don't change all that much to make them not that relevant.
It's especially important, I think, for hobby-type publications because hobbies are, by their nature, they're not everybody, but to get to see a physical object is a lot easier. When it's physical, then looking through the computer, you're not going to see something you're not looking for, you know, and so it becomes a big part of proselytizing for the hobby. It's like, hey, doctor's offices, all that.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we've found as well. But.
And a shout out to Michael's presentation earlier. Just as long as people are seeing coins and pocket change and dealing with coins on a daily basis, coins remain something that is just fantastic. The second that people stop seeing coins is a problem. Now, thankfully, unlike stamps, we have the precious metal component, which is just awesome. I mean, it's hard to get excited about gummed paper, at least for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was 9 years old, I'm sorry I got here late, but I remember when I was 9 years old looking at the Coin World magazine. It was a tabloid. It has two big sections, about 150 pages. And back at that time, the two hottest coins were the 1931 S. Lincoln Cent and the 1950 D. Jefferson Nickel. And they also talked about rolls and bags, and then the bad news came when silver was taken out of they had froze the date on 64, and then they had declared coins, and then one senator from Nevada tried to ban the hobby. And
Yep.
I remember the papers were so thick back then. Why was the magazine so thick at that time, the newspaper? I know it's kind of a heyday when you could find coins out of your pocket change, but why would they have bigger, why was the tabloid so big in those days?
Physically big?
Yeah.
Because they were on newspaper presses. And so the same presses that would print Coin World were also printing a bunch of like local community newspapers. And it's just what people were used to. If you were going, a lot of people bought their Coin World going to their local coin shop where they would expect to buy a newspaper. So they kind of stuck with that big newspaper format. And, you know, if you didn't have the internet, and a lot of these dealers were offering very, very, very specific things in these ads. And my favorite ad is a coin collector's crying towel. It was a novelty. And it was all about crying about the coins you didn't get, or the coins that you lost, or the coins your wife would not let you buy. This is like a legit thing. And it was in the pages of Coin World. It's a very fun, if you ever just see like a 1960s, 1970s Coin World at one of your like public libraries or just at a library sale, take a look at the ads. They are just kooky and wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, another thing is back in those days, there were like, you mentioned 150 pages, like 70 of them were ads, classified ads, page after page, where you could see this weird, crazy stuff. A lot of it from just small dealers, some from big dealers, and it's just kind of great. All those pages, all those ads.
Oh, the classified ads were the best. I remember one that was a dealer who would sell unsearched Lincoln cents. And they said, I recommend that you buy quick because I'm losing my eyesight. Like, with the implication that he's missing all of these, like, 1909 SVDBs. But it's funny, that stuff sticks with you. I mean, I remember the smell of fresh cut grass while I'm reading Coin World, and it's like, that's a memory. You don't get that online. I'm a big print guy, so yeah.
We're gonna get one of those towels.
You can find them on eBay. I have one that I bought on eBay. Just eBay, do a search for Coin Collector's Crying Towel. They show up and they're like $5. I'm sure that they have just hundreds and hundreds of unsold ones because the one I have has no tears, there's no stain, there's no evidence of use. It must have been a very happy coin collector with a very forgiving wife. Larry.
Is there any evidence that the United States Mint and the Coin Advisory Council ever pay attention to what people are saying about coin designs?
I think everyone wants to make coin collectors happy.
Boy, oh boy. Case in point, the latest CAC shows the reverse of, I guess it's the silver dollar. It has this kind of really skinny eagle facing, and I swear the eagle is sitting on a popcorn, which is supposed to be the globe covered with clouds. And I looked at that and I started laughing. And somewhere there's a huge disconnect between what is good art and let's just throw something together and get it out there. I mean, when you see that piece of popcorn, I even want to call it, if I had one certified, I'd ask them to put on their eagle on popcorn.
Larry, this is a guest commentary. I'm going to hold you to it. I want to hear about the popcorn dollar.
If somebody's got the latest issue of Numismatic News or one of them, it's on the second or third page. It's just, the coins that were selected, approved by the CAC. So maybe who's the guy that does the popcorn?
Orville Redenbacher?
Or might be the red $5.
I mean, one of the things that I left out was in 2004 because I got excited about the 60s and we kind of just sort of skipped the 2000s, but the extra leaf Wisconsin coins. Again, something that we all kind of forgot but was the biggest thing on earth, and there were so many ads on the ads for those, and they were one of those neat varieties that you could see just by looking at the coin. For all who don't remember, it was just this like a die gouge. There were two different ones within the reverse of the Wisconsin quarters, so I could imagine Larry's coin being like the extra kernel coin.
The high leaf and the low leaf.
Yes, high leaf and low leaf. Thank you. Yeah, Bob.
The mule of the Sacagawea dollar attracted considerable attention as well when the sacks came out in 2000.
And the same person has 15 out of 20 of them. Yeah, the Sacagawea dollar mule. An absolutely wild thing that shouldn't even exist is the 2000 Sacagawea with the 1999 quarter, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so they pop up every now and then. It's always a front page story. I think Great Collections just sold one for almost $200,000 to the same guy. Collector in the Southwest, he has 15 of them. So, yeah, he wants them all. If you have one of the ones that are the 3 or 5 that he owns, give him a call. Get a Bentley out of it or something. Anything else we want to talk about? We've got a couple letters to the editor that are going to come out of this, so thank you. Thanks for coming. Okay, bye, everyone. Also a plug, I do another talk tomorrow at 2 p.m., and it's all about the future of the coin hobby. So come by if you want just a little more of a free format. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
And here's your certificate.
Thank you.